Basically, every founder I've come across, I can put them into one of these four phases. The first phase is what I call denial. And this is people who just refuse to interact with their financials. It's very common amongst 80%. It's common. 80% is more than I would have guessed, but yeah, a lot. And I see it as particularly common amongst founders who are, the subject matter experts or the creators, the designers, the branding people. They're more creative in nature. And their general attitude is, hey, I know this might need to exist, but it's not my wheelhouse. It's not my specialty. Just make this problem go away from me.
Welcome to the Profit Answer Man podcast. We believe the purpose of business is to make lots of money. We'll show you how to scale and grow your profit and cash flow, all while working less. We're a big fan of the ELF model. Easy, lucrative, and fun. If you're the backbone of America, you deserve to be well rewarded for that. Listen in to see how other business owners are doing it and how to maximize your profit and cash flow. Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Nate Littlewood. It's great to have you join us today.
Likewise. Thank you for having me, Rocky. I appreciate it.
And I'm excited for the conversation. Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
Absolutely. So I am the founder of a business called Ready CFO, which is a fractional CFO consulting firm specializing in working with seven-figure founders in the e-commerce and consumer product spaces. So I basically help them transition from a state of chaos and confusion when it comes to their relationship with numbers to one of clarity and confidence. And really what I'm all about is helping them see their finances and numbers as a strategic ally and something that can empower their growth rather than something that they should be afraid of. Unlike some of the other CFOs or fractional CFOs in this space, I've spent a number of years kind of walking the walk. And what I mean by that is prior to getting into this, I was actually the founder and CEO of my own e-commerce business. So, I've lived through stressing about payroll and figuring out how to finance the next purchase order and all that stuff. Along the way, I was also the lead mentor for a New York City-based accelerator program for a couple of years called Food Future Co. So through that, got a lot of experience working with other founders. All in, I've been in the kind of e-commerce and startup space now for about a decade or so. And for a decade prior to that, I had a global career at an investment bank on Wall Street. So that's what took me from Australia originally to Canada for a couple of years and brought me down to the US.
Quite an interesting background. You made a comment that you're different than other CFOs.
Mm-hmm.
What do you find most of the other CFOs focus on? Because I think a lot of times people use that title and they don't really do that work. They're much more in the weeds than they are in the strategy. I don't know what you've kind of seen.
Yeah. So interesting question. Candidly, I sometimes wonder if I have a branding problem. And I sometimes query if I should actually be calling myself a CFO at all. Because when you look at how I support and interact with my founders, it's really more of a kind of co-founder on demand. What I've come to appreciate about working with, seven-figure founders is most of my clients, they're kind of post-product market fit, right? We know we've got a good idea here. It's gotten a few $1 million a year worth of traction. But we're not yet at the, hey, this is a real company with real systems and a complete organizational chart built out. So what I'm really helping them do is cross that chasm and say, okay, we need systems in terms of finance, but there's a number of other systems and processes that we need to put in place here to graduate from, hey, cool idea with traction to, this is a legitimate, sustainable, grown-up business. So that's kind of the space I operate in. Candidly, over the last couple of years, I've dealt with huge amounts of imposter syndrome because before getting into this, I had never actually been a CFO for anyone before. And the way I explain this is, and how I got into it, is I basically Venn diagrammed my way into what I'm doing now, which is to say, I'd spent a decade on Wall Street at a bank, so I understood numbers. I, used to eat financial models for breakfast, basically. And I spent 7 or so years running one of these businesses. So I have an intimate knowledge of what it looks like to actually own and operate a company like this. And, I kind of put those two circles on top of each other and said, okay, maybe I could explore this fractional CFO space. So, the model or approach to doing this that I've had, I think is certainly, it's not hardcore FP&A. It's not big company, financial analysis like an 8 or 9 figure brand would need. I'm, much more the co-founder wingman. That's kind of the role I play with working with these people.
We're in the same boat, and that's why I'm asking you these questions. The way I describe it is we help the business with strategy using finances as the backbone of doing that. Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, most 7-figure businesses, even low 8-figure businesses, until they make the shift, do not understand their finances and do not make decisions from a strong financial modeling, which isn't really, yes, it's the CFO work, but it's not what you talk about, like the true finance stuff. It's really the strategic stuff.
I agree. And I like the way you put that. To riff on that a little bit, I would add that one way I describe, the value I add to a lot of clients is that it's really about giving finances and numbers a voice. Right. A lot of my clients, they might be product people, they might have strong instincts and brand, or, they understand the customer really well, but they're making these decisions that are starting to get bigger and bigger, riskier and riskier, with more and more zeros behind them. And the finance and data perspective isn't being incorporated into these decisions. So I'm kind of the guy that rocks up to these conversations about big decision points and says, okay, this is what the numbers say we should do, or this is what the numbers are trying to steer us towards. You don't have to listen to the numbers, and you're entitled to ignore them or override them with a brand perspective if you want to, but I'm at least going to give the numbers a voice, so that there's a chance that they can be heard, and hopefully we can make better quality decisions as a result.
I call that being the adult in the room.
I like that.
We have all these ideas and the gut feeling is wonderful, but do you have the data to prove it out? And this is where I think people get overwhelmed. The data that we use is really not, it's 3rd, 4th grade math. It's not calculus. It's not even algebra, right? It's just basic common sense. Hey, what's your leads? What's the conversion rate? How much do we generate in sales? What's it cost us? Overhead, product costs. What's our P&L? Where's all our cash coming and going? How is it hitting our balance sheet and our cash flow? How does that all flow together? And I know that sounds like a lot, but when you understand it, it's not difficult math. You just have to know what goes where and how it flows together, and you make wiser decisions.
100%. I love the way you put that. Definitely.
So we were having a conversation before we started. You use Profit First in your business, but you don't necessarily have your clients use it. Now, I thought that was interesting. I'd love to hear why you use it in your business, and then maybe why you don't always suggest it to clients.
Fair question. Yeah. I use it in my business because I appreciate the discipline that it brings to things. And it forces me to think in advance how much I want to spend on different aspects or categories of the business. And so the way I use it is I have like automated bankroll set up that, sweep a certain amount of the income into different expense accounts, like, once a week usually. And I like it because it forces discipline. And, if you get a bounce from a card or a transaction because there's no money in the account, it's like, okay, like I've hit my budget. I've spent as much as I wanted to spend on that. And I need to, rein things back a bit. So I guess it's just a nice way for me to kind of, put the financial outcomes on autopilot, so to speak. And, you don't have to be diligently watching the numbers like every single day or every single week. Like you can just know that things are coming out of the right buckets. Why I don't use it for my clients is an interesting question. And I don't know, maybe I should. I guess a couple of things come to mind is my clients have very commonly got very, very seasonal businesses. I mean, my own e-commerce business, at one point we were selling products that generated something like 70% of the full year revenue was coming in the month of December. And so, there's huge volatility and swings in terms of, needing to invest in inventory and stockpiling and those sorts of things. I would say that my clients' business and business models are typically a little bit harder to forecast and predict than my own. I mean, I have, pretty predictable monthly retainer type income, and, I can predict my expenses with a pretty high degree of accuracy. So I think the level of variance in terms of forecasts is probably lower for a business like mine. You're probably going to tell me that there's some solutions to all that from a profit first expert. And I'm sure that there are ways that you could, set up inventory accumulation accounts, for example, and, stockpile cash throughout the year to put money aside for these inventory purchases if you know that they're coming. I guess the reality of the sorts of businesses that I work with is that they're almost always bootstrapped. They never have an abundance of cash. And if there are periods throughout the year where there was, I don't know, $100, $200, $300,000 that was just slowly accumulating in an inventory purchase account, for example, or cost of goods sold account, then we'd normally want to put that to use, right? Like there is a return that we could be making on that capital, which is going to be significantly greater than the cash yield or treasury yield of a few percent. And so most of my founders would rather do something with that money than have it sitting in a inventory accumulation account. Am I thinking about this the right way, Rocky? Or maybe you can.
One way we do it is the inventory account. And what I tell these guys is, gals, whoever, every time you sell something, you just put your cost of goods of that inventory in the bank so that you have the money ready for the next order. Things have settled down now, but during COVID, they had to front a lot of money and wait a longer time for stuff to come. Yeah. And so just having the cash ready to be able to do the prepays on the containers and do all of that is helpful. What you're saying, though, is when you're tight to cash, profit first is very difficult. It is. Yeah. But the reason it's difficult is it's saying, hello, you're tight to cash.
Yeah.
Change your business model or figure out your product mix differently or figure out how to get margin. So it's kind of ringing that kind of an alarm bell. I've worked with eComm, and what I find with an eComm is it's all about volume. And you have to have the volume to overcome the low margins usually. And that's how they do it. And so it takes a while to get there. But for your business, you talk about discipline, it brings the adult in the room and says, hey, you said this is what you're going to do it, right? Spend your money like you said you would.
Yeah.
And again, it's a mindset. And that's what I really want to talk about, because what you talk about, especially with your new clients, is a big shift in financial mindset. Just like you, most of my clients haven't had a financial expert in their business.
Yeah.
They thought it was their bookkeeper, but their bookkeeper isn't. They thought it was their CPA. They might have even thought their bank, like they think these people are financial experts that are going to give them good advice, but none of them are actually those kind of experts, because each part of finance has its own role.
Yes.
And I'd love to kind of unpack that of what you see with your clients, what their mindset is, how you shift it, how you deal with all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a 4-phrase framework or a transition that I see a lot of founders going through. Basically, every founder I've come across, I can put them into one of these 4 phases. The first phase is what I call denial. And this is people who just refuse to interact with their financials. It's very common amongst, go ahead.
80%.
80%, wow.
Of business owners, maybe not those who show up, but 80% of business owners don't want to interact with their finances.
Yeah. So it's common. 80% is more than I would have guessed, but yeah, a lot. And I see it as particularly common amongst founders who are, the subject matter experts or the creators, the designers, the branding people. They're more creative in nature. And their general attitude is, hey, I know this might need to exist, but it's not my wheelhouse. It's not my specialty. Just make this problem go away from me. The problem with that is that the finances are going to continue to exist, whether or not you pay attention to them. The choice you have to make is whether or not you decide to interact with them and what sort of relationship you want to have with them. I am of the belief that a big part of the reason that people feel 80%, as you mentioned, 80% of people are in this denial phase is because of a concept called cognitive dissonance, which is that it's very hard for us humans to hold two conflicting narratives at the same time. For example, you can't walk around thinking, hey, I'm a good person, I've got high morals, and I'm a decent human being, but also knowing that you're a shoplifter or a murderer, right? Because that would be a bad person. And I can't be a good person and a bad person at the same time. How this concept applies to a founder is a lot of founders want to believe that they have an amazing product. They're building this amazing company and look at all these cool things that we're doing. That's what they want to tell their community and network. But if the financials are telling a slightly different narrative, which might be, you're kind of mediocre to sucking right now, things really aren't looking that great. It's just hard to internalize those two different narratives of the same business at the same time. And so the uncomfortable one, the one that makes us feel uneasy, the financial narrative, is more likely to be the one that we displace and try to push out of our focus. Anyway, the next stage that people move to, I call overwhelm. And this is where we've made an attempt to understand what's going on, but it was confusing. Too much going on, too much mumbo jumbo, too much terminology we don't understand. And we commonly go back to stage one. And so we haven't really made any progress. This is very common when people try to do it themselves and they don't have help and support and someone like you, to work with to get them, further along. But the next phase 3, would be what I call the intrigue phase. And this is, excuse me, in the intrigue phase is when we start kind of looking over the fence and going, there's some interesting stuff going on over there. I don't quite understand it all yet, but there's probably something I need to learn over the other side of the fence. And at this point, we're, becoming curious about what might be there. The final phase, and where I'm ultimately trying to get these people to, is what I call enlightenment. And at the enlightenment phase, the penny drops. The light globe goes off. And it's now I get it. Now I can understand and see things in my business that I didn't understand before. Now I can recognize that this is actually a powerful tool to help me make strategic and difficult decisions about the growth of my business. And, these finances are not evil and nasty, but they're actually there to help me the whole time. I just, needed to understand them better and how to utilize them. So that's the framework I work with. I come across a number of different archetypes of founders. We spoke about the designer, creator, subject matter expert. They have their own way of navigating through this. I also come across the media buying / digital marketing expert. They're somewhat common amongst e-commerce founders. They have a slightly different approach. Most of my clients is what I would call the business owner archetype. And they've generally been around the block a few times. They've been beaten up, got some scars and war wounds, and they're looking at this, realizing that they need some help. And it's I'm not an expert in every discipline that's needed here. I recognize that finance is not my strong suit. So let me find someone like Rocky or Nate who can, maybe help me. How do you think about that transition, Rocky? Is your perspective any different than that?
I think it's similar. People ask who I work with, and I say I work with people who are allergic to the finances.
Mm-hmm.
They struggle with looking at them. And I kind of had a big aha this morning. I'm at the gym and I'm with my trainer. And he's having me do all these little things, and I'm struggling through it. And I'm like, wait, stop. Let's break this down to smaller steps. Don't have me do 5 things at once. And the 5 things aren't that. I'm just doing a deadlift. But it's the little tweaks. And we've come to understand how my language is different than his. And so now we're understanding how to change the language so that we speak the same. And I'm telling him how I can get to where he wants me. And he's like, you do everything from, I'm telling you where the result is, but you're telling me what you have to do to get to that point. I'm like, yeah. And so I'm like, you know what? I've got to believe this is the way my clients feel. Even though we're communicating, there is that gap. And it's just given me a little bit of empathy to go, okay, now I get it. Now, of course, I'm at the gym and I always post this stuff on social media. I kind of find it funny. I'm over on, I call it the left side because it is the left side of the gym. That's where all the free weights are. And then you see on the right side of the gym, all the machines. All the people on the right side are not muscle bound. They're not strong. They're getting weaker. I'm like, they might be doing the right thing, so to speak, going to the gym, but they're not actually getting their results. So they think they're working hard, but they're not getting the full benefit. And even me, even though I've been doing deadlifts forever, having somebody take me to the next level is going to dramatically shift how much more I get for very little extra effort just by changing the way I approach it. And so I think that's a big thing. And it's kind of what you're talking about. Each of the business owners is at a different place. What I find is that first 80%, they're not going to talk to us. They're going to just walk away because they're allergic. Until they have that bit of interest or until they've been beaten up enough that they want to change, that's when they're coming to us. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who've been 20 years in business who are like, oh my God, I could have really used you when I first started because I made so many mistakes that you would have prevented and I now get it. And I'm like, yeah, but you wouldn't have listened back then. Yeah, you almost have to go through them. So I very much agree with what you're saying. I just don't know how to get more people to care that, hey, you're a business and the language of business is finance. And either you figure it out or you get somebody to do it for you. Either one works. But at the end of the day, if you're not understanding the language of business, you're burning cash. And that's why I think so many businesses fail.
I appreciate your perspective on that, and I wanted to offer some thoughts on it. You mentioned just now, you don't know how, it's hard to get people to care about this stuff, and you've got a legitimate reason. And I'm obviously you're preaching to the converted here. Like, I get it. In my experience, I'm not sure that you can get people to care. I think they have to have their own reason for caring, and they have to have encountered their own version of pain before they become receptive to listening to someone like you or me. In my world, that means that they're stressed about their pay. They're not paying themselves enough. They're getting whatever $30,000-$40,000 a year for running a 7-figure business. They've got some version of cash flow pain that they've encountered. I've taken a lot of sales calls with 20-something-year-old first-time founders, entrepreneurs. I haven't closed a single one of them. I'm sitting there, as a guy who's trying to give them advice and direction. They don't want to listen. They like, no, I need to go do this myself. I want to make my own mistakes.
Okay.
I think they have too much confidence. They haven't had enough time to make mistakes and experience enough pain yet.
And I agree with you on that. There's something about human nature about that one, though, is because people will say to me, well, I kind of want to make my own mistakes. I go ahead and do that. But you see this, all these books back here, I'd rather learn from their mistakes because it's a hell of a lot less painful to me to learn from someone else's mistake. But we as humans seem to want to make them ourselves, or we won't learn the lesson. I can't learn the lesson until I feel pain. I'm like, where did that come from?
Yeah, interesting. I love your perspective on books and learning, and I've gone through periods of my life where I've read a lot, like 2 or 3 books a month, which is, a fair amount for me. But I've often gotten to the end of those, multi-month stints where I might have consumed 10 books in business, and I've got all these ideas and perspectives. But then a few months later, I've forgotten most of it, and I haven't implemented hardly any of it. And I have also gone through periods where I actually put myself on a reading detox, and it's like, okay, you do not need to read anymore. Like, you have enough ideas, you've got enough inspiration, you've got enough advice already. You just need to go and do the thing that you've been procrastinating from doing. And you're going to learn from doing it yourself. And I kind of go in and out of patches of intense reading. I happen to be on one at the moment where I'm not reading much at all because I'm trying to build a business. It's like, I've read enough freaking books about business and finances and money and strategy, and I just need to do the doing now. So yeah, it's interesting though.
And I think there's an intersection there, which one of the reasons I read is because when I work with the client and they're hitting a problem, I'm like, hang on a second. And I know enough to go, this is the book and this is the thing. Sometimes I'm like, this is the book, this is the message, this is your takeaway. You don't need to read it. If you can get that one message that I just handed you, go use it. So that's how I use it. I agree with you because I went through long periods like that. For me now is when you're in that particular thing, what is the book or the podcast or the mentor, whatever it is, what's the learning source I can bring to this moment to merge the two to help me? And now with AI, you can do that. Like I do a lot of my own marketing stuff. So I'm like, okay, I'm doing X. I want you to bring Jay Abraham into the room here and help. How would Jay Abraham write this? Okay, now you've shown me how Jay does it. Now show me how Keith Cunningham's going to do it. And how would he bring it in? And then, you know what, though? I want some of Seth Godin in this because he's going to give it more the value base that I have versus that strict mark. And so I can bring these experts in like I could never bring before. In the same way, I'll bring Claude into my Excel and say, hey, help me build this Excel sheet. I was just doing this for a client. Here's what I found. If I'm not smart enough to talk to Claude, Claude made a lot of mistakes in my Excel sheet. I didn't know how to catch him or properly explain it or challenge the results. I would have made a lot of bad decisions. So there is this, you have to have the knowledge and you have to have the expert, and you got to figure out how to bring it together or have an expert come in and help you at that moment or hand it off to them and say, this is what I need. But this is where I struggle a lot, and at least with my clients in the eComm business, I got to believe it's a lot. How do they deal with marketing? And why I say that is, most of my clients get shiny object syndrome, and some marketing agency comes in and tells them, oh, we can do all these things, but the delivery isn't always there.
Yep. Very common. Is your question about how they staff it, how much they spend on it, what channels and methods they're using?
So I think it really comes down to how do you help them evaluate when to pull the plug on it? Like, is it working? Is it not working? And how do we evaluate it better? Because I think too often business owners are wasting a lot of money on that and not getting the result they want.
Yep. Absolutely. So good question. The way that I tackle this is I start with what I refer to as the, profit generating engine room of a business. And the way that works in an e-commerce company is we start with an initial purchase, a transaction that a customer might make. Hopefully, we've got some element of repeat business and customers are coming back. Now, if we were talking about a SaaS or a software sort of business, your retention rate might be in the 90%. Like some of these businesses have got 95% retention rate. With my clients, like 35% is not a bad outcome for an e-commerce business. Like a subscription, a supplement business might be significantly higher than that, but 35% is doing okay for an e-commerce business. So what we have is a lifetime value that is accumulating over time, and I want to understand what that lifetime value profile looks like. And the first thing I'm going to do is multiply it by gross profit, which is the profit that's left over after we've delivered the product to the customer's door. So for us, that includes the product costs, the shipping, fulfillment, packaging, the mailer, blah, 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 everything we need to get it to the customer's doorstep.
What about the marketing cost for that sale?
So that's the next piece. Once we we understand what the lifetime gross profit is, not lifetime revenue or lifetime value, but lifetime gross profit, then we can start looking at our customer acquisition methods and our, CACs and what it's costing us to feed people into the first step of this machine. Now, there's going to be one of three scenarios that we fall into. Scenario one is that we're what we call first order profitable. And so the gross profit on the first order is greater than the CAC. Scenario two is that we're profitable, but not on first order. It's not until people come back that we get to a point where we're in the black or the green. Then the third scenario is that, no amount of repeat business is getting us to the point where we can justify this CAC. And so we've kind of got a situation here where paid marketing might be really difficult for us. And this might be common in a product that has, a low price point, a low repeat purchase rate. If you've only got $20, $30 worth of lifetime gross profit, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to build a profitable business through Google or Meta. So we look at all this and we understand what may or may not be profitable in terms of, paid customer acquisition. And then we have to kind of build out a portfolio of other marketing and customer acquisition strategies to supplement that, which might be, some element of retention marketing to improve repeat purchase rates. We might need to do affiliate. We might need to do content creators and influencer marketing as well. So it's really about kind of building out an ecosystem of marketing efforts that can feed new customers into what is hopefully a long-term profitable, LTGP situation. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense to me. My question to you is, do most of your clients know how to do that before you work with them?
No, none of them do.
Okay. And that's what I would have expected, is that they don't. This is the math we're talking. This is where we started at the beginning. This is the kind of math that needs to be done. And I know you said this is all eComm. I'm going to tell you something. It's true of any damn business. It doesn't matter what kind of business it is. The only difference is what you talked about. Hey, what's my repeat rate? If I'm selling roofs, it's a 1. If I'm selling something else, it might be a bit more often. It really depends on the particular type of service that you're doing or what your offering is, what that looks like. And it's understanding what all of that is so that you can make the appropriate choices. And then you talked about gross profit, and we tell all of our clients, I want you to focus on gross profit as your focus, not revenue, because you can't run your company on revenue. You run your company on gross profit. That's what it's got to cost you to do all the business stuff of overhead, including paying yourself. And so if that's not occurring, it's a gross profit problem. And there are different levers to fix gross profit. But the other reason I like that is, and you can take eComm, and it's probably very true in eComm. I have an $8 million business. I can afford that. Well, actually, your gross profit's $1 million. So you have $1 million business. Start behaving like $1 million business and not an $8 million business, because you really don't have 8 million. And that little perspective shift, I think, for a lot of people is big.
Yeah, I like that. Very true.
Is there, I know we could go on for hours, but is there anything else you wanted to touch base on today, or points that we left open that we should kind of close the loop on?
Well, thinking about this from an eComm perspective, I would just point out that we spend probably a lot more time than you do on profitability, one measure below gross profit. We have a concept called contribution margin, which is the gross profit less the customer acquisition spend, which is, typically Meta, Google, TikTok ad spend, basically. So that's kind of an acknowledgement that for a lot of these businesses, the engine of driving customers, and you kind of need to bake it into your cost of goods sold, right? Like, you don't have a business unless you have a way of pushing customers into the top of your funnel. And unfortunately, these platforms have gotten to a point where they control the traffic, and you need to basically bake their cost of customer acquisition into a number that we spend a lot of time with, which is contribution margin. So yeah,
we always break out sales and marketing cost as a separate driver, and we look at it again, my businesses are all over. Some don't have a big driver to it, some do. So if that's a big driver, we're more cognizant of it. And then, of course, that's coming into the picture. And then the question is, are we actually getting a return on that sales and marketing? Is this channel working versus that channel, this advertising versus that advertising? All of those different things is which one, and are they attracting the right type of buyer? So
Yeah.
we're just doing it slightly, same concept, slightly different.
Yeah. I hear you.
And so, yes, all of those things are, which reminded me, the world of SEO and marketing is changing. It used to be a world owned by Google. Today, if you're not teaching AI how to recommend your product, I'm starting to see stuff come out that if AI recommends a product, it goes from Google's 2 or 3% conversion rate up to like 15, 20, 30, 40% conversion rates. But you've got to now refocus everything on teaching AI why your particular product or service is the one that should get recommended. And there's a whole art and science to that. In the world of business, you're constantly shifting and changing and
Absolutely.
seeing what happens.
Totally. I think to, again, riff off that idea a little bit, something that I'm fascinated by, especially in the consumer product space, is how AI is removing the barrier to entry for marketing and branding. Once upon a time, the world of product developers was kind of split into the haves and have-nots in terms of people who knew how to do ad creative and copywriting and do a cool photo shoot and make sexy looking ads that people wanted to click on. And there was part of this industry and some of the founders and companies who knew that and knew how to do it well. And then there were parts who didn't. And the parts who didn't either had small businesses, or they focused on Amazon, or they focused on wholesale. They couldn't build these strong direct-to-consumer brands. What AI is doing is removing that barrier to entry, and it's now enabling a lot of people who couldn't do marketing before to now do marketing. And we're moving to a world where Zuckerberg and his buddies are really just going to be selling clicks to the highest bidder, because there will be more competition enabled by AI. The price of these clicks is going to go up. And I think marketing is no longer going to be a thing that brands differentiate themselves on. It's not going to be the thing that determines winners and losers like it was 5 or 10 years ago. So we got to ask ourselves, what is going to be the thing that differentiates the winners and losers? What happens if marketing is not the thing that separates the pack? And where this thought has taken me to, I'd love to get your opinion on this as well, but I'm really bullish on product as the marketing tool. How can your product be so good that it markets itself? How can your product be so amazing that you don't need an ad or an email to get people to come back? People are going to come back on their own without being reminded by something popping up in their Instagram feed. So I'm increasingly bullish on businesses and brands that know how to do product and know how to do product better than anyone else, because that is, the tasting, the feeling, the texture, how the thing works, like the taste it leaves in your back of your mouth. Like, that's the thing that AI, I don't think is going to be able to do for us for a long time, that human interaction with the product. And so the founders who can crack that, I think, are the ones that are going to have the long-term advantage in an AI-powered marketing world.
And I very much concur with that. If you look at the iPhone, right, they don't need to really advertise it. I mean, today they do because they haven't improved it. But when it first came out, the iPod, like, they did not need to do much. I don't think Ferrari and Porsche advertise much, right? They just, so there are products that have that ability. There's also products that have network effect. Like, if you have it and your friend has it, it makes it better. So you become the spokesman, right? I found this cool product. And there are softwares that do that. Like, I use certain things that I have been a champion for because I think they were great products. So, yeah, I think you're correct. If you can create products that do that, you're still going to have to get that initial, push out there. But once you get past the push, your cost of advertising drops through the floor because you're not playing that game. What we're talking about with service providers is getting off of Google, not do your basics, old school postcards. Because when I pay for a postcard, if it's a service that I want, I hold on to the postcard. The postcard costs me $1. A click costs $5, right? So, and my postcard sits on my fridge for 9 months, waiting for that because I keep forgetting to call, or I know I'm going to call. And so it's just the shifting the way you're marketing. So it could be going to a whole different place. I also think the world is changing, and we're going to go, because of AI, I don't know what's real anymore, and I don't know what's fake. And so I might be more likely to go back to wanting to see, touch, and feel, which means we go back to local. And so that changes the marketing game again. These are all guesses, unless we put the math behind it and watch what's actually happening, right? It's a guess.
Exactly.
Test, try, see what happens, see if it works.
Yep.
And constantly be willing to shift and change, because that's the world of business, constantly shifting and changing.
Yeah, there you go. I love the way you put that.
If people are in eComm and want to reach out to you, how do they do that?
Yeah, 2 places to find me would be the website, which is Future Ready. On the socials, I'm most active on LinkedIn. My name again is Nate Littlewood, and I'm posting there pretty much every day, so it should be pretty easy to find.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure, Rocky. Really nice chatting with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this unedited video of the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you'd like to catch the full episode and learn more about what we do, check us out at profitcomesfirst.com. We also go through the Profit First book in each and every chapter in the beginning episodes of the podcast, so check those out as well. Thanks for listening, and here's to you having a more profitable and growing business.